or say Sapchat years America, convince the world of one simple lie, that if you defy American tariffs, your economy dies, that if you challenge the dollar, you collapse, that if you stand against Washington's economic weapons, you become the next Venezuela, the next Iran, the next cautionary tale that every finance ministry studies and every government fears. That lie just died. Not slowly, not quietly, not through some academic paper that nobody reads. It died in 3 minutes. On a Tuesday morning, when President Trump announced 100% tariffs on Chinese goods. And China's Commerce Ministry walked to a podium in Beijing and said 5 words that changed everything. We are not afraid. Then they did something nobody expected. They didn't negotiate, right? They didn't beg. They didn't send delegations to Washington. Instead, within 72 hours, China stopped buying American soybeans worth $24 billion, halted rare earth mineral exports, that 78% of American defense manufacturing depends on, and signed a $8 billion energy deal with Russia using $0 American dollars. 3 moves, 72 hours, 1 news cycle, and 1 revelation that exposes the biggest economic lie ever told to the American people. A lie so massive, so carefully constructed, so deeply embedded in every business school textbook that uncovering it changes how you understand everything about who actually holds power in 2026. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you is not opinion. It's not speculation. It's the documented collapse of an illusion that controlled global trade for nearly half a century. And it's happening right now. Most people watching the news this week are processing what happened as a trade dispute, a tariff war negotiation tactic. They're gonna see the headlines, watch the cable news panels, hear the analysts, and conclude that this is just another chapter in the ongoing US-China rivalry. They are catastrophically wrong. What happened this week is not a trade dispute. It's a public funeral for the most powerful economic weapon America ever built. And the people who understand this difference, the ones who see what's actually unfolding behind the headlines, will make decisions in the next sub-year months that protect their families, their savings, and their future. The ones who miss it will wake up in 2026 wondering why their dollars don't stretch the way they used to, why their mortgage rates climbed, why the costs of everything, from gasoline to groceries, quietly doubled while the news kept telling them everything was fine. Here's the structural truth that nobody in mainstream media will say plainly. Trump's tariff threat wasn't a weapon. It was a bluff. And China just exposed it in front of the entire world. Let me show you exactly how to understand why. China's response was so devastating. You need to understand what tariffs were actually designed to do. The theory is simple. America puts a 100% tax on Chinese imports. Chinese products become twice as expensive for American buyers. American consumers stop buying Chinese goods. Chinese factories lose customers. Chinese workers lose jobs. The Chinese economy bleeds. Beijing comes crawling back to Washington, begging for a deal. That theory worked in 2018. It worked in 2019. It worked partially in 2020. And then something changed that almost nobody in American political circles fully understood. China spent the next 6 years building something that made the entire tariff weapon obsolete. They built alternatives. Here's what happened on Wednesday morning, just 24 hours after Trump's tariff announcement. China's Ministry of Agriculture issued a directive that stopped all American soybean purchases, not reduced, not delayed, stopped. Now, here's the part that should make every American farmer's stomach drop. China was buying $26 billion worth of American soybeans every year. American farmers in Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, Minnesota built their entire businesses around this market. When that market disappears overnight, those farms don't just struggle, they collapse. But here's where it gets devastating for Trump's strategy. The same day China stopped buying American soybeans, they signed a contract with Brazil for $1 billion in soybean imports. They expanded their deal with Argentina by $1 billion. And Russia agreed to fast-track $1 billion in agricultural exports through their new Siberian rail network. Do the math, 26 billion lost to America, 28 billion gained from alternatives. China didn't lose a single soybean. They just changed who profits from selling them. Harvard economist Jason Furman, who served as chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, called this exactly what it is. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that tariffs only work if your opponent has no alternative suppliers. The moment alternatives exist, tariffs become self-inflicted wounds. That's what just happened. America didn't hurt China. America hurt American farmers, while China simply rerouted its supply chain to countries that were already prepared to take Beijing's money. Now hold that thought, because the soybean story is actually the smallest piece of what unfolded this week. The next two pieces are so significant, so structurally important, that historians will look back on this Tuesday as the day American economic dominance officially ended. Stay with me. If you think soybean trade war sounds boring, wait until I show you what happened with rare earth minerals. Next. Because what China did with these subchut elements is going to determine whether American military technology still exists in 5 years. This is the part that should genuinely scare every person watching. Let me give you a number that will reframe everything you think you know about American power. 78%. That's the percentage of rare earth minerals used in American defense manufacturing that comes from China. Not 8%, not 28%, 78%. These aren't optional materials. These are the elements that make F-35 fighter jets fly. They're inside every smartphone in your pocket. They power every electric vehicle on American roads. They embedded in MRI machines, satellite systems, missile guidance technology, and the semiconductors that run the entire digital economy. And on Thursday morning, 48 hours after Trump's tariff announcement, China's Ministry of Commerce did something that should have caused an emergency meeting in every American defense contractor's boardroom. They restricted exports of 7 critical rare earth elements: terbium, trium, europium, and 3 others that you've never heard of, but that your country's military depends on. Now, pause on this, because this is the moment where the entire architecture of American military supremacy revealed a vulnerability that Pentagon strategists have privately worried about for 15 years, but publicly pretended didn't exist. Lockheed Martin needs these minerals. Raytheon needs them. Boeing's Defense Division needs them. Every single advanced weapon system that America has built since 1995 contains rare earth elements that China controls the supply of, and here's where the lie gets exposed in its full, ugly truth. For decades, American politicians from both parties told the American people that we were the world's strongest military power, that nobody could challenge us, that our defense industrial base was unbeatable. What they didn't tell you was that the foundation of that defense industrial base was sitting in Chinese mines, Chinese refineries, and Chinese processing facilities that took Beijing Samsung years to build, while America was busy outsourcing its industrial capacity to maximize quarterly profits. China didn't just respond to tariffs, they revealed a hostage situation that's been quietly developing since the 1990. The hostage is American military readiness. And China just showed they're willing to tighten the rope. Goldman Sachs analysts estimated this week that if China maintains current rare earth restrictions for 6 months, American defense production capacity drops by 6 months. That's not a long-term threat. That's a near-term crisis hidden inside what looks like a trade dispute. Meanwhile, China announced expanded rare earth processing partnerships with Russia, Vietnam, and Myanmar within the same news cycle. They're not just restricting American access, they're locking in alternative buyers and processors that bypass any American attempt to build domestic supply chains. Trump's tariffs were supposed to bring manufacturing back to America. Instead, they exposed that the manufacturing America still has depends on materials only. China provides. The lie wasn't about tariffs. The lie was about American economic independence. And China just proved that lie has been false for at least 2 decades. Now, I need you to understand something. Everything I've shown you so far, the soybeans, the rare earths, all of it is the warm-up act. The third move China made this week is the one that could end the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency. And if you don't understand what that means for your bank account, your retirement, your children's future, you need to keep watching. Because this is where everything changes. By the way, if this analysis is helping you see what mainstream media won't show you, hit that subscribe button right now. I publish breakdowns like this every week, and the next 12 months are going to be the most consequential period for American economic power in our lifetimes. You don't want to be caught off guard. Here's where the real story lives. And here's why I'm telling you this is the biggest economic news of 2026. Even though most Americans haven't even heard about it yet. On Friday morning, China and Russia signed an energy partnership worth $7 billion over 10 years. That by itself is significant. But here's the detail that should have been the lead story on every news network in America. Not a single dollar of that $7 billion deal will be transacted in American currency .0.none. Nothing. The entire deal will be settled in a combination of Chinese yuan and Russian rubles using a payment system called CIPS that Beijing built specifically to bypass the SWIFT network that America has used for decades to control global finance. Let me explain why this matters more than anything else happening in geopolitics right now. For 52 years, since 1974, when Saudi Arabia agreed to price oil exclusively in dollars in exchange for American security guarantees, the entire global energy market has run on American currency. Every barrel of oil traded internationally, every cubic meter of natural gas shipped across borders was bought and sold in dollars. This wasn't a small thing. This was the foundation of American economic supremacy because every country on earth needed dollars to buy energy. Every country had to either earn dollars by selling things to America or borrow dollars from American-controlled financial institutions. That constant global demand for dollars kept American interest rates low, kept American debt manageable despite growing every year, and gave America what economists called the exorbitant privilege of being able to print the world's money. That privilege is what allowed America to maintain a $3 trillion national debt without economic collapse. That privilege is what kept your mortgage rates lower than they should have been. That privilege is what made it possible for American consumers to buy products from around the world at prices that no other country's citizens could afford. China and Russia just publicly signed a $7 billion energy deal that completely bypasses that system. But here's the part that escalates this from significant to historic. Within 24 hours of that announcement, 4 other countries indicated they would explore similar arrangements. Saudi Arabia, the country that started the petrodollar system in 1974, signaled it would consider yuan settlement for some Chinese oil purchases. The United Arab Emirates announced an expanded yuan trading partnership. Iran, already operating outside dollar systems, formalized new yuan agreements with 5 Asian buyers. And Brazil's central bank confirmed it would expand its yuan reserves. This isn't a trend. This is an avalanche. Kenneth Rogoff, the former chief economist of the International Monetary Fund and one of the most respected voices in global finance, said something this week that deserves to be heard by every American. He said, "The dollar's dominance was never permanent. It was conditional. It existed. Because alternatives didn't. The moment functional, alternatives exist. The privilege ends. Not in a dramatic crash, but through accumulated decisions by central banks, finance ministries, and trade negotiators who quietly conclude that holding dollars is no longer essential. That moment is now." When Trump deployed his tariff weapon on Tuesday, he didn't intimidate China. He gave Beijing the perfect public stage to demonstrate that the dollar's necessity is a myth. That alternatives exist. That the system, Americans have been told, was unshakable, is actually being unbuilt, brick by countries that prepared for this exact moment for 2 decades. The biggest tariff lie wasn't about trade. It was about leverage America. Thought it had it. China just proved it doesn't. Now you're probably asking yourself, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my family, my job, my savings? Because all this geopolitical analysis is fascinating, but it doesn't matter if you can't connect it to your own life. So let me do that right now. Let me show you exactly how the events of this week reach into your wallet within the next sub-8 months. Here's what nobody on cable news is going to tell you tonight, but what you need to understand by the end of this video. When the dollar's global demand decreases, even slightly, several things happen to ordinary American families. Things that don't make dramatic headlines, but that quietly reshape your financial life. First, mortgage rates rise because America funds its government debt by selling treasury bonds to foreign buyers. And those foreign buyers need to be paid in dollars they want to hold. When global demand for dollars weakens, America has to offer higher interest rates to attract buyers. Those higher treasury rates become higher mortgage rates, higher car loan rates, higher credit card rates, higher rates on everything. You finance second, the cost of imported goods rises. This sounds like exactly what tariffs were supposed to do to force higher prices on Chinese imports. But here's the trap. Tariffs don't just raise the price of Chinese products. They raise the price of every product that contains Chinese components, which is essentially everything in the modern American economy. Your car has Chinese components. Your phone, your appliances, your medications, your clothes, all of it gets more expensive. Third, gas prices climb because if even a portion of global oil trading shifts to yuan settlement, the demand for dollars in energy markets weakens and the dollar's value relative to other currencies declines. A weaker dollar means imported oil costs more dollars per barrel, which means higher prices at every gas station in America. Fourth, your retirement accounts feel pressure because companies that depend on Chinese supply chains see their costs rise faster than their pricing power, which compresses profit margins, which depresses stock valuations. The 401k, that's been growing for decades, suddenly stops growing the way it used to. Fifth, and this is the one that hurts most over time. The purchasing power of every dollar you save erodes faster. Inflation that we've been told is transitory, stops being transitory when global currency dynamics shift against the dollar. This is not theory. This is documented economic mechanics that have played out in every previous reserve currency transition in history. From the Dutch guilder to the British pound to the dollar itself. Each transition produced exactly these effects on the citizens of the previous reserve currency holder. And the events of this week, the soybean rerouting, the rare earth restrictions, the $4 billion non-dollar energy deal, all of them together accelerate the timeline of these effects from sometime in the future to sometime in the next sub-8 months I know this is heavy. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear on a Tuesday afternoon, but there's one more piece of this story that you need to understand before you finish this video. Because there's a scenario, 3 scenarios actually, that determine whether what I'm describing becomes reality or whether something completely different happens. And the difference between these scenarios will define the rest of your economic life. Scenario 1. America recognizes the structural shift and adapts. In this scenario, Washington abandons the tariff strategy, accepts that the unipolar moment has ended, and negotiates a multipolar trade framework that preserves American influence without depending on dominance. Mortgage rates rise modestly. Inflation stays elevated, but manageable. American living standards adjust downward by perfectu sub 1% over a decade, but the system stabilizes. This scenario requires political wisdom that current Washington has not demonstrated. Scenario 2. America doubles down on economic warfare. Trump escalates tariffs to 2%, 3%, expanding to other countries. Allies are forced to choose between American markets and Chinese supply chains. And many quietly choose China because their economies require Chinese inputs that American alternatives cannot replace. The dollar's reserve status erodes faster. Domestic American inflation accelerates. The $30 trillion national debt becomes increasingly difficult to service at higher rates. By 2030, American economic power resembles British power in 1950, still significant, no longer dominant. Scenario 3. The transition becomes disorderly. Markets lose confidence in dollar stability before alternative systems are fully ready to absorb global trade. Currency. Volatility spikes. American financial institutions face crises as bond markets reprice American risk. The federal government faces choices between debt service and entitlement spending that have been politically impossible for 50 years. This scenario is not a prediction. It is a risk that becomes more likely with each escalation. The scenario that unfolds depends on decisions being made right now in Washington, Beijing, and capitals around the world. And the actions of the past week have made the harder scenarios significantly more likely than they were just 1 month ago. This is the cost of believing your own propaganda. America convinced itself that the tariff weapon was unbeatable. China just proved it isn't. And now the consequences begin to unfold in real time. Here's what I believe, and I'll say it directly. The biggest tariff lie in world history wasn't a single statement. It was a million-year-old assumption that American economic power was structural rather than circumstantial, that it existed because of something inherent to America rather than because of conditions that could change. China didn't just respond to a tariff threat this week. They demonstrated that those conditions have changed, that the alternatives have been built, that the leverage has shifted, that the king isn't wearing as many clothes as the cable news anchors want you to believe. Power doesn't vanish in a single moment. It erodes through small revelations that individually look like ordinary news stories, but together describe the quiet end of an era. This week gave us 3 such revelations, and the people who understand what they actually mean will navigate the next decade very differently than the people who don't. Now, I want to hear from you. Here's my question, and I want you to answer it honestly in the comments below. Do you believe America can still reverse this trajectory and reclaim the economic dominance it had even 5 years ago? Or has the architecture of American power already shifted in ways that no policy, no president, no tariff strategy can repair? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one, and your perspective shapes the analysis. I bring you in the next video. And listen, if this breakdown helped you understand what's actually happening behind the headlines, do me one favor. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because what I just described isn't going to slow down every single week. From now until the end of LAT is going to bring more revelations like the ones we covered today. And you don't want to be the person who finds out about these shifts 6 months after they happen. You want to be the person who saw them coming. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this video with one person who needs to understand what's really happening to the dollar, the economy, and the future they thought was guaranteed. I'll see you in the next analysis. Until then, stay sharp, stay informed, and never mistake 5 words from Beijing for a small story. This was the week the lie died.